What would you do if the person you're about to marry, the person you've planned your entire future with, suddenly froze in absolute terror when looking at your family photos? And when you asked what was wrong, they whispered 4 words that would change everything. Don't you see it? I'm Sophia, and what I discovered that Christmas night didn't just end my engagement. It started the most elaborate revenge plot of my life. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why some secrets should never see the light of day. But before we dive into this absolute chaos, make sure you're subscribed to Revenge with Sophia, because the stories I share here will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. Hi everyone, it's Sophia, and welcome back to my channel where we dive deep into the most shocking betrayals and the revenge that follows. If you're new here, this is where I share real stories of people who thought they could get away with deception, manipulation, and betrayal. Spoiler alert, they were wrong. Today's story takes place during what should have been the most magical time of year. Picture this, December 2022, just 3 months before my wedding day. I was 28, completely in love, and spending Christmas Eve with my family and my fiancé, David. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months, and I genuinely believed I'd found my soulmate. David was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Successful marketing executive, charming, ambitious, and he seemed to adore my family. My parents loved him. My younger sister thought he was perfect, and even my usually skeptical grandmother had given her approval. We had the venue booked, invitations sent, and I had found the dress of my dreams. But here's the thing about perfect facades, they have a tendency to crack at the most unexpected moments. And sometimes, all it takes is one old photograph to bring an entire house of lies crashing down. Now, before I tell you what happened that night, I need you to understand something about my family. We're big on traditions, especially Christmas traditions. Every year, without fail, after dinner and presents, my mom would bring out the old photo albums. You know the type, those thick, leather-bound books with the plastic sleeves that somehow always stuck together when you tried to turn the pages. It was a ritual we'd done since I was little. We'd spread out on the living room floor, hot cocoa in hand, and flip through decades of memories. Baby pictures, awkward teenage phases, family vacations, graduations, the whole timeline of our lives captured in faded photographs and Polaroids. David had participated in this tradition for the past 3 Christmases, always laughing at my childhood pictures and asking questions about family members he hadn't met. He seemed genuinely interested in my family's history, which I found endearing. Little did I know, his interest was far from innocent. So there we were, Christmas Eve 2022, bellies full of my mom's famous prime rib, the tree twinkling in the corner, and that familiar pile of photo albums spread across the coffee table. My dad was dozing in his recliner, my sister was scrolling through her phone, and David and I were curled up on the couch as my mom began her annual photo presentation. "Oh, here's Sophia's first Christmas," my mom cooed, pointing to a picture of me as a tiny baby in a red velvet dress. "And here's when she was 3 and insisted on wearing her Halloween costume to Christmas dinner." David laughed at all the right moments, made all the appropriate comments about how cute I was, and seemed completely relaxed. We flipped through my elementary school years, middle school awkwardness, high school graduation, college adventures, the usual family photo album journey. Then my mom reached for a different album, one I hadn't seen in years. "Oh, this one has some really old pictures," she said, blowing dust off the cover. "These go way back, some are from when I was a kid, and even some from your grandmother's time, Sophia." She opened to the first page, and I saw photos I barely remembered. Black and white images of my grandparents as young adults. My mom as a little girl in the 1970s. Family gatherings from decades past. David seemed interested, asking questions about the people in the photos, the locations, the time periods. "This is my mother at her college graduation in 1965, my mom explained, pointing to a beautiful young woman in a cap and gown. "And this is her with her college roommate, Sarah. They were best friends all through school." We continued flipping pages, and I found myself getting caught up in the nostalgia. These were pieces of family history I hadn't thought about in years. My mom told stories about relatives I'd never met, explained the backgrounds of photos that had always been mysterious to me. Then we reached a section from the late 1970s and early 1980s. Photos of my mom as a young woman, just starting her career, living in a different city before she met my dad. "Oh, these are from when I lived in Portland," my mom said. "I shared an apartment with 3 other girls. We had such crazy times." She pointed to a group photo of 4 young women, all with the distinctive hairstyles and fashion of the early 1980s. They were laughing, arms around each other, clearly having the time of their lives. "That's me," my mom said, pointing to herself. "And that's Janet, Lisa, and... oh, what was her name? Rebecca Martinez. Haven't thought about her in years." And that's when everything changed. I felt David go completely rigid beside me. Not just tense rigid, like every muscle in his body had suddenly turned to stone. I glanced at him, expecting to see him smiling at yet another embarrassing family photo. But instead, his face had gone completely white. His eyes were fixed on the photograph with an expression I'd never seen before, pure, undiluted shock mixed with something that looked almost like terror. "David," I said quietly, "you okay?" He didn't respond. He just kept staring at the photo, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. My mom and sister hadn't noticed yet. They were still reminiscing about the good old days in Portland. "David?" I said again, a little louder this time, placing my hand on his arm. He jerked away from my touch like I'd burned him, finally tearing his eyes away from the photograph to look at me. And the expression on his face, I'll never forget it. It was like he was seeing me for the first time, like I'd suddenly become a stranger. "Don't you see it?" he whispered, so quietly that only I could hear. "See what?" I whispered back, completely confused. He looked back at the photo, then at me, then back at the photo. His hands were actually shaking now. "Don't you see it?" he repeated, his voice barely audible. "Look at her. Really look at her." I followed his gaze back to the photograph, studying the 4 young women. I saw my mom, obviously, looking young and carefree. I saw the other 3 women, all smiling and happy. I looked more closely at Rebecca Martinez, the woman my mom had pointed out. And then, slowly, like a picture coming into focus, I began to see what had made David react so violently. Rebecca Martinez. Dark hair, brown eyes, distinctive bone structure, that particular way of holding her head when she smiled. She looked exactly like David. Not similar, not reminiscent. Exactly like him. The same eyes, the same nose, the same jawline, even the same dimple in the left cheek that I'd kissed 1,000 times. It was like looking at David in a wig and 1980s makeup. My blood ran cold as the implications began to sink in. I stared at that photograph until my eyes burned, hoping I was imagining things, hoping the resemblance was just a coincidence. But the longer I looked, the more undeniable it became. Rebecca Martinez could have been David's twin sister. Or his mother. His mother. The thought hit me like a physical blow. David had always been vague about his family background. He'd told me his mother died when he was young, that he didn't like to talk about it, that it was too painful. He'd said his father raised him alone and that they weren't close. I'd respected his privacy, never pushed for details, never questioned why he had no family photos in his apartment, or why no relatives came to family gatherings. Now I was beginning to understand why. "I need some air," David said suddenly, standing up so abruptly that he nearly knocked over my mug of hot cocoa. "David, wait," I started to say, but he was already heading for the door. I need a minute," he said, grabbing his coat and stepping out onto the front porch. My mom and sister finally looked up from the photo album. "Where's David going?" my sister asked. "He just needed some air," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's been feeling a little under the weather," but inside my mind was racing. I excused myself and followed David outside, finding him standing at the edge of the driveway, staring up at the sky like he was searching for answers in the stars. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He turned to look at me, and I could see that he'd been crying. David, who I'd never seen show any vulnerability beyond the occasional frustration with work, had tears streaming down his face. "Sophia, I can explain," he said, but his voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand him. "Explain what, exactly?" I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew. "Explain why you look exactly like Rebecca Martinez? Explain why you've been lying to me about your family for 4 years? Explain why you're about to marry me when you apparently know something about my family that I don't?" He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. Then opened it again. "Her name wasn't Rebecca Martinez," he said finally. "It was Rebecca Martinez Chen, and she didn't die when I was young." My heart stopped. "She gave me up for adoption when I was 3 months old. I've been looking for her my entire adult life. I hired private investigators. I've searched public records. I followed every lead I could find. And then I met you, and I fell in love with you, and I had no idea. I swear to God, Sophia, I had no idea she was your mother's friend." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "You're saying that woman in the photo, Rebecca, is your mother?" "I think so. I mean, I know so. I've been carrying her picture around for 15 years. The one from my adoption records. It's the same person. I felt like I was going to be sick. So when you met me—" "I had no idea," he said quickly. "I swear on my life, Sophia, I had no idea there was any connection to your family. I loved you completely independent of any of this. Meeting you, falling for you, proposing to you, none of that had anything to do with this. But you've been lying to me for 4 years," I said, my voice getting louder. "You told me your mother was dead." "I thought she might as well be," he said desperately. "She gave me up, Sophia. She abandoned me. As far as I was concerned, she was dead to me." "And what about now?" I asked. "Now that you know she was friends with my mom? Now that you know I might be able to help you find her?" The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. "You bastard," I whispered. "How long have you been planning this? How long have you been using me?" "I haven't been using you," he protested. "I love you, Sophia. I want to marry you. This doesn't change anything between us. This changes everything," I shouted, no longer caring if my family could hear us. "You've been lying to me about who you are for our entire relationship? And now I find out that you have some connection to my family that you've been hiding? How is that not using me? Because I didn't know," he said. "I swear I didn't know until tonight." "But now you do know," I said coldly. "And I can see it in your eyes, David. You're already planning how to use this information. You're already thinking about how my mom might be able to help you find Rebecca." He didn't deny it. He couldn't deny it, because we both knew I was right. "Get out," I said quietly. "Sophia." "Get out," I repeated, louder this time. "Get out of my parents' house. Get out of my life, and don't you dare contact me again until you figure out who you really are and what you really want. Please." Let me explain. You've explained enough, I said. The engagement is off. And with that, I walked back into the house, leaving him standing alone in the driveway on Christmas Eve. The next few days were a blur of canceled wedding plans, return deposits, and very uncomfortable conversations with family and friends. But underneath all the practical chaos of calling off a wedding 3 months before the date, I was consumed by one burning question. Had David really not known about the connection to my family, or had this been an elaborate long con from the very beginning? I'm not the type of person who just accepts someone's word, especially when that someone has just revealed they've been lying to me for 4 years. So I did what any rational person would do in this situation. I decided to investigate. First, I started with what I knew. David had told me his adoption story, his search for his birth mother, his claims about the private investigators and public record searches. If all of that was true, there would be a paper trail. I called my friend Jessica, who works in private investigation. Yes, I actually know a private investigator, don't ask me how. That's a story for another video. Jessica agreed to help me dig into David's background, both to verify his story and to find out if there was any evidence that he'd known about the connection to my family before that night. What we found was complicated. David's adoption records were real. He had indeed been adopted as an infant by the Chen family in San Francisco. His birth mother was listed as Rebecca Martinez, age 19, no father listed. The physical description matched the woman in my mom's photo perfectly. But here's where it gets interesting. Jessica found records of David hiring not 1, but 3 different private investigation firms over the past 8 years. The most recent firm had been hired just 6 months before David and I met. 6 months before he met me, David had been actively searching for a woman named Rebecca Martinez, who had lived in Portland in the early 1980s. Suspicious? Absolutely. But not conclusive proof that he'd known about my family connection. Then Jessica found something that made my blood boil. In the files from the most recent private investigation firm, there was a list of Rebecca Martinez's known associates from her time in Portland. The list included full names, current addresses where available, and family information. And right there, third name on the list, Sarah Thompson, N.E. Williams, Rebecca's college roommate, currently residing in Millfield, Oregon. Married to Robert Thompson, 2 daughters, Sophia Thompson, born 1994, and Jennifer Thompson, born 1997. My full name. My sister's full name. My parents' names. Our address. David had known exactly who I was before he ever approached me. But Jessica wasn't done. She kept digging, and what she found next was even worse. The coffee shop where David and I had our chance encounter 4 years ago? He'd been going there every day for 3 weeks before we met. The barista remembered him because he always ordered the same thing and always asked about the regular customers. The yoga class where we had our second chance encounter the next week? He'd signed up for a month-long package the day after he first saw me at the coffee shop. The hiking group where we had our third coincidental meeting that convinced me we were meant to be? He'd joined it specifically after hearing me mention to a friend that I went hiking there every weekend. Our entire love story had been orchestrated. Every sweet moment, every romantic gesture, every declaration of love had been part of an elaborate plan to get close to me so he could find his birth mother. I had been nothing more than a means to an end. But here's the thing about me, and this is why I have a channel called Revenge with Sophia. I don't just get mad. I get even. And I was about to get very, very even. Most people, when they discover they've been manipulated and lied to for 4 years, go through the traditional stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I skipped straight to plotting. See, David had made one crucial mistake in his elaborate scheme. He'd fallen in love with someone who's just as good at planning and manipulation as he is. Maybe better. I spent 2 weeks formulating my plan. 2 weeks of pretending to be heartbroken and devastated while actually researching, planning, and preparing for the most satisfying revenge of my life. First, I needed to find Rebecca Martinez myself. If David wanted to find his birth mother so badly that he was willing to destroy the life of an innocent person to do it, then I was going to make sure he got exactly what he deserved. Using the information Jessica had gathered, plus some additional digging of my own, I tracked down Rebecca Martinez. She was now Rebecca Martinez Sullivan, living in Seattle, married to a tech executive, and mother to 2 teenage boys. I called her. "Hi, Mrs. Martinez Sullivan," I said when she answered. "My name is Sophia Thompson, and I believe you knew my mother in Portland in the early 1980s. Her name is Sarah Williams now, but it was Sarah Thompson then." There was a long pause. Sarah Thompson. Oh my God, yes. We were roommates. How is she? How did you find me? "She's wonderful," I said. "Actually, I'm calling because I have some information about your son. The one you placed for adoption in 1985. Another long pause, much heavier this time. "How do you know about that?" she asked quietly. "Because he's been using me to try to find you," I said. "And I think you should know what kind of person he's become." We talked for over an hour. Rebecca told me about her teenage pregnancy, her difficult decision to place the baby for adoption, and the guilt she'd carried for 37 years. She'd thought about trying to find him countless times, but had always convinced herself he was better off without her. I told her about David, about our relationship, about how he'd manipulated and lied to me. I told her about his search for her, about the private investigators, about how he'd orchestrated our entire relationship to get closer to finding her. By the end of our conversation, Rebecca was furious. Not just at David, but at the situation, at the deception, at the way he'd used an innocent person in his search. "What can I do?" she asked. "How can I help?" "I'm glad you asked," I said. "Because I have a plan. Here's what we did." Rebecca agreed to meet with David, but on my terms and with my involvement. I told David that my mom had reached out to her old friend Rebecca after our conversation, and that Rebecca was interested in meeting him. I set up a meeting at a nice restaurant in the city, telling David it would just be him and Rebecca. What David didn't know was that I would be there too, along with my mom, Rebecca's husband, and Jessica, my private investigator friend. The night of the meeting, David showed up dressed in his best suit, carrying flowers, probably expecting some kind of tearful reunion with the mother who gave him up. Instead, he found himself facing a table full of people who knew exactly what he'd done. "Hello, David," I said as he approached the table. "I'd like you to meet Rebecca Martinez Sullivan, your birth mother." The look on his face was priceless. Confusion, shock, and dawning horror as he realized he'd been set up. "Sit down," Rebecca said coldly. "We need to talk." What followed was the most satisfying conversation of my life. Rebecca told David exactly what she thought of his methods. She told him that while she'd always wondered about him and hoped he was happy, she was disgusted by the way he'd manipulated and used me. She told him that any chance of a relationship between them was destroyed by his deception and cruelty. My mom told him how disappointed she was, how she'd trusted him with her daughter's heart, and he'd broken it for his own selfish purposes. Jessica presented him with copies of all the evidence we'd gathered, the private investigator reports, the timeline of his surveillance of me, the proof that our entire relationship had been a lie. And I told him exactly what I thought of him. I told him that he was selfish, manipulative, and cruel. I told him that he destroyed not just our relationship, but any chance he might have had of a genuine connection with his birth mother. I told him that his actions had consequences, and that this was his consequence. "You wanted to find your mother so badly that you were willing to destroy an innocent person's life to do it," I said. "Well, Congratulations. You found her. And now she wants nothing to do with you. Was it worth it? David tried to defend himself, tried to claim that he really had loved me, that finding Rebecca was just a bonus. But nobody at that table was buying it. The evidence was too clear, the timeline too damning. Rebecca stood up to leave, but before she went, she said something that I'll never forget. I spent 37 years wondering if I made the right choice in giving you up, she told David. Now I know I did. You're not the son I hoped you'd become. You're someone who hurts people to get what you want, and I'm ashamed that you came from me. She left her contact information with the restaurant manager and told them that if David ever tried to contact her or her family, they should call the police. That was 6 months ago. David tried to contact me a few times in the weeks following our confrontation, sending long emails full of apologies and explanations and pleas for forgiveness. I blocked him on everything and haven't heard from him since. Rebecca and I stay in touch now. She's become friends with my mom again, and we've actually had some lovely conversations about life, relationships, and the importance of honesty. She's a wonderful woman who made a difficult choice as a teenager and spent decades carrying guilt she didn't deserve. She deserves better than David, and I'm glad she finally knows it. The wedding venue, the caterer, and the photographer were all understanding about the cancellation, especially when I explained the circumstances. I lost some money on deposits, but honestly, it was the best investment I ever made. Better to lose a few $1,000s than to marry someone who had been lying to me for 4 years. My family was incredibly supportive throughout everything. My sister, who had initially been devastated about missing out on being a bridesmaid, now jokes that she's available for hire as a private investigator after watching Jessica work. My parents were hurt that someone they'd welcomed into their family had been using them, but they're proud of how I handled the situation. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever imagined I could. For a while, I questioned everything about my judgment and my ability to trust people. But then I realized something important. I didn't fail to see through David's deception because I'm naive or stupid. I failed to see it because I'm a good person who believes in the best of people, and that's not something I should change about myself. The lesson here isn't that we should all become paranoid and suspicious of everyone we meet. The lesson is that some people are willing to go to extraordinary lengths to get what they want, regardless of who they hurt in the process. And when you encounter someone like that, the best thing you can do is expose their true nature and make sure they face consequences for their actions. David got exactly what he deserved. He spent years searching for his birth mother, finally found her, and lost any chance of a relationship with her because of his own choices. He also lost someone who genuinely loved him, or who would have if the person I loved had actually existed. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or complicated. Sometimes it's just making sure that someone's actions have natural consequences. David wanted to find his mother more than he wanted to be honest with me. So I helped him find his mother, and I made sure she knew exactly what kind of person he'd become in his search for her. He got what he wanted. It just wasn't what he expected. If you enjoyed this story of manipulation, investigation, and well-deserved consequences, make sure you subscribe to Revenge with Sophia and hit that notification bell. I share stories like this every week, and trust me, they only get more dramatic from here. Leave a comment below and let me know, have you ever discovered that someone in your life wasn't who they claimed to be? How did you handle it? I love reading your stories, and who knows, yours might inspire a future video. And remember, you deserve people in your life who love you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. Don't settle for anything less. I'll see you next week with another story that proves karma always finds a way. Until then, stay strong, stay smart, and never let anyone use you as a stepping stone to get what they want. This is Sophia, signing off.